Today we're going to use the law of sines right up here by setting up ratios that we can solve, and this helps us find lengths of sides. So we have these sides that we'll be trying to find given angles. So in this case we're given two angles and we want to find the side. So we want to use the sine of this b, so I'm going to write sine of 45 over the b that we don't know equals the sine of 80 over, and what's across from that is the 3. And now we have a proportion. To solve this proportion, all we do is cross multiply. So it becomes 3 sine 45 equals b, and the sine of 80 goes on the bottom. So what happens is the b goes up, the sine takes its place, which we've done before, and this, because it's been on the bottom, gets multiplied. And so now all we have to do is press this into our calculator to get our answer to b. And so we get rounded to the 10th place value is 2.2. So our answer to b is 2.2. Gives us the answer to b, but we also want to find a. To do that, we need to know this angle. Since all angles add up to 180, we can add these two, which we get 125, and subtract that from 80, we get 55. So 55 is this angle right here for a. So now we can set up a proportion of sine of 55 a equals, and I'm going to use sine of 80 over 3. And it makes no difference which of the other two we use, but I'm picking this one. So once again, we have the letter on the bottom. So these two switch spots, and this gets multiplied. So what we end up with is 3 times sine of 55 over sine of 80. And that equals a. And if we take that in our calculator, we'll get the answer rounded as 2.5. And so we found both sides, a and b, by using the law of sine. So you can use this when you have two angles. On this problem, we want to first draw our triangle so we have a visual. So I'm going to draw a triangle, and I'm going to call it NPQ, because that's what it's called right here. And I have P being 42 degrees, and I have Q being 65. So the little n goes across from the angle of the big N, so this is 5. And if we do our math with our angles, this ends up being 73. So now that we have all our angles, we can figure out our sides, which is this is a little p, and this will be a little q. So to find p, we're going to use the sine of big P, which is 42, over the little p, equals, and I'm going to do sine of n, and the reason I am because it's given to us, n being my fault, n of 73 over 5. And so now all we're doing is these two are going to switch spots, and I'm going to multiply by 5. So 5 sine 42 over sine 73 equals p. And all we have to do is press that in our calculator. And the answer rounded to 10th place value is 3.5. So now we have the answer to p. So we know this is 3.5. Now we can go and find q. So I'm going to go sine of q, which is 65, over q, equals, and I'm going to use n again, sine of 73 over 5. Once again, these two switch spots, and we multiply by what's on the bottom. So this becomes 5 sine 65 over sine 73 equals q. And so we press that in our calculator, and we will get and that answer rounded is 4.7. So we have our Q and our P. We found it by knowing two angles, but we had to create a triangle from the problem given to us. What we're going to do is, we have quite a few steps. When we're given two sides and an angle, we have to find this side, and we need to find the angles. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use what I know, which is sine 105, because it's given, and it's over 9. And the only other thing I know is the 6. And since 6 is the sign of S, I have to figure out the sign of S with the 6. Now we're going to do the math. And in this case, we're trying to find this answer. So all I have to do is multiply this by 6. So 6 sine 105 over 9 equals the sign of S. When you do the math of that, we get 0.643951. Don't round the problem, only round our answer when we get to that. Now we have sine of S. To find this angle measure, if you remember, all we do is write this on the other side with a -1. So it becomes sine, the inverse, basically, of what we've done. That's how you find angle measures, equals S. And when you press this into your calculator, we get 40. So now I know the angle of S is 40. So I'm going to write that up here. So once I know this angle, I can figure out the third angle, because I can take 105 plus 40 equals 145, and then subtract that from 180, because all angles of a triangle equal 180, and I get 35. So this is now 35. Once I have the angles, I can now figure out t. So I can do the sine of 35, which is t, over t, and I'm going to use the sine of r, which happens to be 105 over 9. And now once again, the letters in the bottom, so these two are going to switch spots, and the 9 gets multiplied on the other side. So it becomes 9 sine 35 divided by sine of 105 equals t. And if we press that in our calculator, we will get the answer of 5.3 rounded. So there's our answer to t. So we found both angles and we found the side by going through this process. Here's another problem. First thing we want to do is draw our picture. So I'm going to draw a triangle, and I'm going to call it M, N, P, which is exactly what's given to us. And N is 32, and N, which is across from the angle, is 7, and P, which is across from P, is 4. So this is just like the last problem, where we have two sides and one angle, so we need to figure out one of the angles. So I'm going to use what I have. So in this case, I'm going to go sine of 32 over 7 equals, and since I have the 4, I have to put the 4 on the bottom, and it's across from P, so I want to find the sign of P. So once again, this problem is, we're trying to find P, so I'm going to multiply 4 times sine 32 over 7 equals my sine of P. Do this in your calculator, and we will get, once again, I want to remind you, do not round this as you're doing the problem, so I'm writing what I have in my calculator. And the other, when we're trying to find an angle, this just gets moved over. So it's sine -1 of the 0.302811 equals our angle measure. So we press this into our calculator, and we will get the answer. Rounded to the nearest degree, it's 18 degrees. So P is 18. And once we know two of the angles, we can figure out the third. So we'll take 32 plus 18, which is 50. And I'm going to take 180 and minus the 50 to give me 130. So we have a obtuse angle of 130. Obviously my picture is not drawn to scale, but I know the three angles, so I can figure out this last side. I'll just we'll call it M, because that's what we're trying to find. So erase that. This is M. So I'm going to use the sine of P, which is 18 over 4, to equal the sine of M, which is 130, over the little m, because that's what we're trying to find. So now, once again, we have it on the denominator, so these two switch spots, and we multiply by 4. So m becomes sine 130 over sine of 18, and this gets multiplied by this 4, so the 4 is in front. So now we're going to press this into our calculator, and that rounded to the tenths is 9.9. So m is 9.9. So we found all three angles and all three sides.